Anyway, with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, illustrator, writer, cartoonist, and publisher, Jeff Lewonczyk. Take it away, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you, Bill and Donna, for inviting me to be here as a part of this. It's really an honor. And part of that is to sort of take a step back a little bit. I often refer to myself as kind of a fair weather cartoonist. It's something that I love to do and don't do nearly as much of as I'd like. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm aware at this stage of my life how much patience and discipline goes into cartooning, and those are qualities that in certain fundamental ways I lack. And so I definitely take my hat off to everybody who, really, is devoted to the grind and the focus and the joy of creating something wonderful with really just, lines and images on a page. As we'll go into a little bit, I have a very deep theater background, which is sort of a major part of where a lot of my interactions and organization sort of come from, and that's something that in some ways is kind of like taken a lot of my more direct attention rather than the kind of head down solitary time that cartooning requires. But let me sort of share some images, and we'll start at the beginning here. So I was a comics crazy kid growing up. I just was surrounded by them at all times. What we have here on the page is really kind of my holy trinity of things that I loved. Disney comics, particularly Carl Barks, who I learned much about as I got older. Mad Magazine, where I learned about the parodies of things before I learned about the things themselves. And Archie Comics, just kind of that like rich world that was created over time by such a variety of creators, onto which I was able to project a lot of my own sort of suburban aspirations. I grew up in Connecticut. I live in New York now, New York City. So I'm speaking to you from 3 hours in the future. And so I spent a lot of time growing up like emulating these creators and these stories, and trying to build my own world of cartooning from a young age. But as I got older, I discovered theater. That was what I did when I was in high school. For a few years there, it was sort of a 50-50 split, but ultimately theater ended up winning out. I met my wife doing theater at college. She's here on the call listening, I hope. And we ended up graduating from college and deciding to move to New York City, where she grew up, and start doing theater together on our own. So we started our own theater company in 1999 called Piper McKenzie Productions. And our first show, which I don't have depicted here, was actually very much a sort of group collaborative work. That what we did was we brought in a pile of old comics. We had Little Nemo in Slumberland and Crazy Cat and Bringing Up Father, like really like old early comic strips, and used those as the basis for group improvisations and kind of built a show out of that. So even our theater company's name, Piper McKenzie, came from the fact that the person who ran the venue was like, I got to send out a press release. You got to tell us what this show's about. And we're like, we don't know. So we made up a name, and it was Piper McKenzie presents the Tinkle Pack Kids in the Great Yo-Yo Caper. And then we kind of tried to figure out how to make a show that in any way, shape, or form coordinated with that. But these images you can see that I used for whenever we were doing any kind of show. I kept that muscle exercised a bit using with the publicity, with the postcards and posters that we would do to promote our shows. And a lot of times in the shows themselves, there was a lot of very comic book focused content. So the one on the left here, Bizarre Science Fantasy, was very overtly a sort of EC Comics creep show kind of riff that we did with these sort of short, they were silent, wordless movement theater pieces that were really had like like sort of genre theme. So there's one that was like a riff on the birds, but it was the amphibians, and you just heard all this frog noise. We had a sound designer make all of this like off-screen like frog noise that were attacking the characters. A sci-fi one that the called North of Polaris, which was sort of the basis here, and then kind of a ironic sort of horror crime story called Hell's Bells. The one on the right we have here was from around the same time. There was a Polish avant-garde playwright we really liked his work called named Stanisław Ignacy Witkiewicz, and so we based one of our shows by him. He was like over 100 years ago writing plays, but we based one of on like old James Whale horror films, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Old Dark House and stuff. And so I decided it would be great to make a poster that kind of evoked that as well. So that kept me going for a long time. And then we ended up working with a really like becoming staff members at a small theater in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. We never got paid for any of this. We had day jobs the entire time, but this theater is called The Brick. Because it was like a brick lined theater, about 100 seats, a little bit less, but it was this amazing sort of laboratory. We could do all sorts of stuff there all the time, and attracted a lot of people who were sort of making the artistic exodus from Manhattan, which had just become too expensive to live and work into Brooklyn. This is about 20 years ago, and so one of the projects we did was a radio comedy show that we would perform live, but then record and put the recordings online, that we called the Brick Radio Crash Box. And you can see here that I did a sort of a postcard design for that was very sort of George Harriman influenced, with the brick flying at the radio's head. Crazy Cat being one of my absolute favorites. Here's some other designs that I did for other shows. That was, I tried to get in a cartoon style wherever we could. We even got to do certain sort of fun things, kind of jumping off from that again from sort of a publicity angle. We did a lot of theater festivals. We would always do themed theater festivals because it was a great way to bring in a big tent full of people, whether they're doing one performance or five over the course of a month. It just became a real scene, and it was super fun to be able to bring all sorts of people together like that. And so one of them, we did a festival called the Film Festival, a theater festival, and it was all theater based on film or it having to do with film and so on. And the weekly magazine Time Out New York, which was a sort of event guide that you could get all over the city at that time. They're not publishing anymore, sadly, but they had asked us to provide like a full page feature of some sort, and we ended up deciding to do a storyboard of Oedipus Rex as if it were going to be made into a film. So it's very very silly with some you got your movie references like From Here to Eternity here, and like it gets the whole tragedy in one little page. That was a fun one that I was able to do. But the comic and cartoon influence really went into all of the actual shows that we did too, as you can see from some of these stills. Very sort of broad costuming and characterization. A lot of the stuff that I did, I had my collaborators reading Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. We did a lot of stuff with using principles of the gutter, and like trying to like simplify our lines to make the characters more relatable and stuff, even in terms of the acting style. A lot of the time, this was like another couple of shows that we did. We did sort of a Charles Manson spoof musical on the left there. We did a sort of battle show called Craven Monkey and the Mountain of Fury, which had sort of a capoeira martial arts theme, but very so it was also a creation myth, so we loved playing around with all of that stuff. We even one of our festivals was a video game theater festival, and we did a series of short plays based on classic video games in the style of different playwrights. So you have Donkey Kong is interpreted by Tennessee Williams over here on the left, and Bertolt Brecht's Pac-Man here on the right. So that sort of cartoony style that I grew up loving was something that we brought to our work over a period of years. And at a certain point, I convinced our friends at the theater to do a comic book theater festival. So we did two of these in 2011 and 2014. And so it was all shows that were themed off of comics, comic strips, comic books. We had all sorts of stuff. We worked with Gabe Fowler, who runs the Desert Island store here in Brooklyn, which is one of my favorite shops, anywhere in the world. And he helped us get Johnny Ryan to design our poster for our first edition. And then, we had Arsa Koryak, who's just such a tremendous mimic and stylist, do the poster for our second festival. He does a lot of performance, comics performance in his Carousel series that he's been doing since the 80s in New York and at like conventions kind of around too. So hundreds, thousands maybe of different cartoonists have done stuff with him, but he's a friend and someone who we was very closely involved in the festival. So he did this wonderful design for us with all these different sort of character styles and stuff. So here's a whole group of people we did for a photo shoot, various participants, theater people and cartoonists. There's Bob Sikoriak down there, Jason Little up here, a bunch of folks who were part of a sort of a superhero show with different elements in there. And that year we actually had a reading of someone had done some comics with DMC from Run DMC, and he came to the theater and participated in the reading. So I got a nice sort of bragging rights to take a photo with him with our program guides there, which was really exciting. One show that I wrote and directed for the festival in 2011 was a piece called The Bubble of Solace, which is actually about a guy who owns a comic book shop and can kind of go into, project himself into his comics, which are projected on a big screen in the theater. And we had different artists creating, the images for the different stories. This was one of my own. I did sort of a very like loose, like underground, like 60s underground comics type of style for this. And, the character is like, processing the drama of his life through his interactions with these characters and everything. So it was really fun to bring, comics onto the stage like that. Other shows that we had there. So this was a Jack Kirby bio play called King Kirby that was written by Crystal Skillman, who's a playwright, and the comics writer Fred Van Lent, who they're a married couple, and they weren't able to actually do the show the first time around because he was working for Marvel at that point, and they said, no, you can either continue working for Marvel or you can do the show that doesn't necessarily speak terribly highly of Stan Lee, because this is when he was still alive. But they ended up coming back and doing the show later. There was this was a show called Galaxy Girl, very like sort of a Barbarella type of spoof. So that was an element of all of the theater stuff and really trying to bring those worlds together. Throughout all of that time too, I was working a corporate job in the communications field. I actually sort of very accidentally stumbled in as a temp into a global PR firm, and I did a lot of their employee communications, and that ended up expanding into doing a lot of their social media design and stuff like that. And it was a great opportunity to kind of come in through the back door and be able to figure out, to sort of convince, hey, we have these platforms. I have this interest in drawing and visual communication. How can we make that work? So for a number of years there, I was these are a couple of examples of, we would do like a Monday motivation quote on Twitter, and I'd source the quotes and illustrate and design those for them to share. And then I'll put these on mute so that they can play kind of underneath. But we did a few different like animated, or not really animated in quotes, opportunities for this. Is like the eclipse in 2017. We did a couple of videos that year where I would this was me experimenting with the iPad for the first time and really like creating these images to try and talk a little bit about the history of eclipses and so on, because it was a PR firm. Our clients did all sorts of stuff, but we wanted to show off as a company, oh, look at the sort of storytelling that we can do. Maybe you should hire us, for that kind of stuff. So it was really fun to be able to sort of apply all of this and create these little videos. Here was one that we did for Halloween, sort of a history of Halloween kind of thing. That I did these like long panoramas that we just sort of like, spanned across about the history of Halloween, which is still a topic that I'm, passionate about and really, really love. And so, that was just a real treat to, be paid, as part of my salary job, in addition to all of the sort of like, sort of grunt work and drudgery that I had to do, to be able to pitch and be able to work on these fun projects along the way. Another one that I got to do is this was so the at Cannes in France, they did it's the famous film festival that takes place there, but there's also an advertising festival that occurs every year, and I was part of the team that would go there, and I would do sort of live cartooning and graphic recording sometimes. And one year we did the video series that I did all of the design for and worked with a video editor to kind of bring out different takeaways from a lot of these sessions. And we were doing this in pretty close to real time, like designing these on the day of the session, and putting the video out the next day. And they're all like barely a minute or two, but as you well know, a minute or two of drawings is, on a screen is a tremendous amount of work off screen. And so, again, like a really fun, project to be able to do for the few years that we did that. I also did our publicity design for we sponsored a competition for the called the Young Lions. This is all the young creatives that would come to the festival, and they'd have a competition and everything. So we ended up having ads on the back of magazines and posters and banners in the space. So definitely just a really cool and kind of I didn't when I got the job, I had no idea that I would ever be able to bring this stuff into it, and I was really grateful for a while there to have that support. But things change. And I did some client work too over the course of that time too. So I did a series of sort of ads via tweet for MasterCard. There was like this is when they were rolling out their chip cards, and they were talking about it was an evolution in security. So they had we did various. This was the evolution of like parental controls. Like there were no parental controls, and it was like parents being like, "Don't watch that," and then it was like, "Oh, we have our virtual parental controls on the screen that you could use." One of the most exciting projects I got to do during that phase was this was for the executive leadership of Procter and Gamble. They'd had had an internal executive meeting, and one of the executives wanted to do a piece where he was talking about how to be more efficient as a company, but they were so he had an idea of like caricaturing the leads, all of the executives of the company. And so I got to work with him to kind of figure out a story. They're all out at sea and everything, and talking about how they're communicating as a leadership team, and all of these different like scenario planning and stuff. That's the CEO, and it ended up being this whole narrative that he delivered and spun, but I developed the sort of the story and the visuals for that, and that was very cool to be able to do, but a very rare experience in that world. And so over time, that sort of there's leadership changes, that sort of work was becoming a less less people were tightening budgets. It was hard to get to sell in this kind of fun work, especially as the pandemic hit and things were changing in the business world as a result of that. Like nobody wanted to do stuff that was perceived as frivolous. So I work at a different company now, but haven't had as much opportunity to do that kind of thing over the past 5 or 6 years. But it's always open for that kind of thing for sure. And it's just a great reminder that whatever situation you're in, if you can find a way to bring that that sort of avocational cartooning and illustration interest into what you're doing, it can be a differentiator. People don't it's a skill that a lot of other people sort of almost feel like is magic, especially in the corporate world. And so any way you can kind of find a foot in the door there, it's great to be able to really kind of like jam yourself in there if you can. But so we ended up Hope and I ended up we had a kid in 2011. We stepped away from doing theater because in addition to working full time, just very exhausting for a number of reasons. But for a number of years after that, we worked on a number of different ways to really try and find how can we continue to bring theater to life in the context of this passion for comics and cartooning that we share. And so we briefly had a sort of a one-off short performance series called The Consequences, where we would tap comics and visual artists in New York City and be like, how can you translate what you're doing into performance? So we did a couple of sessions of that. This is a still, I wasn't able to get the video down, but like that's Matthew Thurber doing like a sort of shadow puppet piece over some animated visuals that he projected onto a screen, and he had this like original soundtrack going with it. So it was very artsy and a lot of fun. But again, it was tough to sort of find people to sign on for that, because it's, in addition to whatever art form you're comfortable with, to then translate that into a completely different art form is like an extra challenge, and so not something that people tend to undertake lightly. So we talked about a number of different ways, like how can we like open the pool, how can we find ways to make this type of work more inclusive. And so we created a project called the Paper House that we did for 4 years. So off the coast of Manhattan, there's an island called Governor's Island. It used to be a Coast Guard base for many years, and then it lied empty. And then, starting around 20 years ago, the city started to open it up as a park, and that really, hit its stride. And as part of another group of artists, we were able to have access to one of the old officers' houses over the course of a full summer. And we had a month that we could figure out that we were invited to do what we wanted in there. So we created this project called the Paper House that we did 4 times. And what we did was we covered all of the walls in this house in paper and left crayons and scissors and construction paper and markers and stuff all over the place, and anybody who came in was able to contribute to this like visual world that was going on there. So we had 4 themes. The first year we were just sort of figuring it out and figuring out what to do. The second year was seasons. Each of the different rooms in the house was a different season. We did one based on questions, and there were different rooms based on who, what, where, when, why, and how. And then the final one we did, which with that year, the residency was in the fall because they started to open up the house for more seasons. We did a haunted house. We did a Halloween themed one. So you can see some pictures here of what we did. And there's a lot of like, we would invite artists to come along and play and hang out, but it was also anyone in the public who was just going there to enjoy Governor's Island as a park was able to come in and contribute to the stuff we did. So here's a series of like sort of cartoon dioramas we did of as like a haunted house, sort of a modular haunted house. There's my son on the right. He's 14 now, but that was him, like 7 or 8 years ago. And you can sort of see we had a sort of portrait gallery with people could pose for photos, but also put stuff on the walls. People who had the opportunity to design their own ghosts, which was a lot of fun. This was our seasonal year. This was in the summer room. We had Make a Bug, and people all came in and designed bugs on the wall. We had our first year, we had a library room where it was just spines of books, and people would put the titles on there or make their own. We had their own, little folded construction paper books, and we would run little workshops where people could either make their own or fill out ones that had already been made. So we had a little library of those that we retained. We still have all of those. And so just on my own level too, I collaborated with friends. I had a photographer friend who was interested in doing a photo shoot with me with some 2-dimensional masks that I was going to make. And so I sent him some sketches, and he picked a number of these, and we ended up doing this photo shoot that was just tremendous fun, of me wearing these masks and kind of in different scenarios around our apartment and stuff, which was really fun. I would love to do something like this again at some point, because that was just really, really a treat. To be able to bring that sensibility into 3 dimensions was very cool. And then speaking of our Sikoriak in this carousel series, for a while there, we did it only ended up being 2 episodes, but we did a serial with live readings with drawings that and writing that I had done on the screen. So really kind of like a live comics reading with multiple voices. And it was a serial called That's a Lot Better, But I Still Hate made it that is a that you can sort of see an example here of me and some of the cast, including my wife Hope, sort of on the left and that group on the right there. And it was basically a story about me trying to make a comic and all of the different sort of trials and tribulations I would go through. And so it was a whole group of like, sort of gnomes, pixies, and fairies that helped to bring the comic to life. And we would like, every panel was like a shot in a movie or something like that. And so that's sort of some of the group that was, sort of helping to put all of that stuff together. A really fun project, but unfortunately, our second episode was like December 2019. We were going to come back and do it again in March 2020, but we all know what happened in March 2020, and kind of went off the rails, and we haven't gone back to it, which I would love to get back to at some point, because that was a really fun project. And the first episode of that we re-recorded and put it as a up as a YouTube video, so that's available to see. But really, the pandemic hit. It was and so some of these more everybody reacted to the pandemic in different ways. It ended up, you know, excuse me, getting over a cold. It was a very isolating time. And so, I was trying to develop some work on my own. And so I have two books that I put out of this series that I, again, hope to be ongoing, called Congress of the Monsters, which is an idea that I had, for a long time, of like basically how do the monsters get together and make decisions for the monster community. And obviously it's highly satirical. But I was able to really lean into a little bit more of an illustrative style with pen and ink. So these were all done with nib pen and with micron pens, sort of bringing these images to life. And it was the first time I'd ever done any images quite this ambitious. And so all of these I had to do like 3 or 4 times, and then I'd be like I'd spoil it and have to start all over again. So that was like a tremendous learning experience for me. But really happy with how the pictures came out. I was able to do, once the pandemic ended, came out and did a few live readings of that, which was a lot of fun with the images projected on the screen, to be able to bring some of that acting muscle back into it. Then I did a second issue that I finally just got printed earlier this year. This one I did all of these images on the iPad, because I was like, I don't know, that I wasn't quite ready to go through the grief of having to do multiple versions of each, and it was a much more efficient process. But I do think that there's a grit to some of these earlier images that isn't quite reflected in the second generation ones, even though there's I was able to get the compositions a little bit more precise and stuff through trial and error. So but those are super fun, and if anybody wants a copy, I'm happy to mail you one. I have plenty. But working on my own like that it wasn't always easy. Like I am, when all is said and done, a really social creature. And so trying to figure out, I still love print. I'm obsessed with print culture. I have you can't really see here, but this, for a New York apartment, we have a really kind of unconscionable number of books. Comics, we have as many shelves as you can cram into a space like what we have. And so, I always want to find ways to use that to, fulfill myself creatively, but also connect with other people. And that's where the next idea came in, which is sort of the main project I'm working on now, and is really the reason that I'm here, because, reaching out to Donna as a contributor to this last year is what, led to us connecting and her asking me to join tonight. So with Hope, my wife, and a third friend of ours who I have known since high school, a writer named Kristen Lee, I was sort of I soft sounded this project with her of like some sort of print literary publication, and she was totally on board, and we talked about a number of different ways we could do it, and decided to try it out as a broadsheet newspaper. We ended up calling it Slip Slips, because it's sort of the funny story behind that is, this was on my birthday a year and a half ago, and we were talking. We knew we wanted to do the project, and we were were like, let's talk about what we're going to name it. But first, it was my birthday. Being obsessed with books, I was like, let's go to this used bookstore I've wanted to go to, where I had some credits because I sold them some books, and we ended up picking up. I found it was a wonderful modern library 2 volume edition of the collected prose of Gertrude Stein, that had been unread. And I was like, ooh, this is something to pick up. And we were like talking later that day about what do we want to call the piece? What do we want to call the publication? And I was like, well, maybe there's something in Gertrude Stein. Maybe we can open up a book and find something. And opened up to a random page at the book, and it was this poem called Susie Asado. And I was like, holy shit, Kristen, we met because of this poem, or we understood, we were exposed to that poem together in high school. We met during a summer arts program that was held on the campus of Wesleyan University in Connecticut, where we both grew up. That's where we met. It was kind of the first time that, we were away from home for a few weeks and like realized, oh, there's other like, freaks and weirdos out there like me. And I had this vivid memory of being introduced to this poem. One of the counselors read it out loud to us, Susie Asado, and it's largely kind of like a phonetic poem. It's a sound poem. There's not much meaning to it. But we were like, oh, well, then we got to take something from this, a name from this poem, because it's kismet, obviously, that we discovered it at random while we're trying to name it. And we pulled out different words and phrases from it, but ended up settling on slip slips, which and it's on the banner there at the top of it. It's a line from the poem that reads, Susie Asado, which is a told tray sure, a lean on the shoe, this means slips hers. Like, but we ended up falling in love with the phrase because it's so hard to say. It's like, wait, what are you saying? Slips? What? And it's very difficult to Google. One of the reasons that we wanted to create this project was to kind of sidestep the algorithms and connect with people more directly. And um so things that in a different context, 10 years earlier when I was like posting everything that I did to Instagram, suddenly something that was a disadvantage back then all of a sudden felt like an advantage, with the political landscape becoming more fraught, and the sort of the shine removed from connecting with people online through social media networks and stuff. Like the idea of this analog print only publication, named in this like confounding kind of way, was really appealing to us. And so that was really the beginning of the slip slips process. And so we had did a lot of this is what it looked like when it came to print. 5,000 issues. We still have a whole lot of them. So if anybody wants any, again, happy to share, mail and distribute. But just such an exciting project. And so we had a lot of antecedents. Like, what were the things that inspired us in terms of other publications that were out there? And so I'll go through a few of those here. One of them was Pushpin Studios, the legendary New York-based graphic design studio that Milton Glaser and Seymour Quast and a number of other John Alcorn, a number of other great designers and illustrators from the past. They put out their own publication as to publicize their own work, gain interest in clients and stuff. And so it started out as the Pushpin Almanac back in the 50s, and they would just come up with a theme, create different visuals for it and so on. And I love it so much. It was a little pamphlet back at that point. They ended up expanding it into the Pushpin graphic, which was a little bit more of sort of magazine size, but still very thin. I've been able to track down and buy some later issues of it. At that point, Glazer wasn't really doing much in it. Seymour Quast was really kind of the lead guy behind it, but they were among the first to really back in the 60s use these like sort of throwback styles and old fonts and old clip art designs and things like that to and make those feel fresh and contemporary again, and hugely influential because of that. So we wanted there to be a bit of that feel in it. Another huge inspiration for us was Sister Corita Kent, the pop art nun, as a lot of folks know her, based out of Los Angeles, who taught art at the Immaculate Heart College, and just a real pioneer in design. But her artwork also has a really strong social component to it too, which really relates to a lot of the stuff that we've those other projects that I was describing previously. And so a publication that she edited that came out of Immaculate Heart was what they called the Irregular Bulletin, which was, every issue was a different format, looked different, felt different, but very homemade feeling, very sort of sort of scrappy and rough around the edges, a lot of different styles of different, fonts and ways of, presenting content and everything, images and text as image and things like that. So that was a huge appeal for us as well. We also just love a lot of the different 60s countercultural publications, and all of the sort of crazy stuff that they would experiment with and try along the way. So, images like, layouts like these are from, various books that I have that compile a lot of these different publications from, mostly the US, but some of them from, Europe and Australia and stuff along the way. Just love all the experimentation and play that went into all of that. The Whole Earth catalog was another great inspiration. Really one of the first, even though it was very, business focused, it brought communities together and really helped people gain access to supplies and materials and culture and thinking that they might not have otherwise if they were like living in a commune or other sort of community kind of off the beaten path. And so that wonderful like cluttered layout with like images and text, and there's like little letters interspersed with it, testimonials from people that participated in stuff. And one of the things that makes it fascinating is that Stuart Brand, who was like sort of the creator of this, was also like a Silicon Valley pioneer, and he's still alive and doing stuff, but a very interesting figure that really ties that 60s counterculture into frankly a lot of the mess that we're in today with technology, but harkens back to that brief little period where it was very utopian, where there was this like promise in terms of the connection we'd be getting from computers and stuff. Another publication that was that we thought a lot about, even though what we're doing doesn't really resemble it very much, is Semina, which was a publication of created by Wallace Berman, who is a West Coast beat. He based mostly in Los Angeles, but in San Francisco for a period of time too. And this was like a very much like a small print run. Like you had to know about it in order to be able to get it. Like if you reached out to him, he would send you a copy. And often it was like an envelope filled with a few pieces, and there were poems and images by different people in his circle. These images are from a book called Semina Culture that like reproduces all of the issues and has info about a lot of those issues. And I've gotten to know his son Tosh Berman, who sort of manages his estate and keeps his example alive. And actually, we have an interview of him in the second issue of Slip Slips to sort of in homage to that publication. And then, the old newspapers, of course, like, the New York World, which was just such a tremendous venue for incredible illustration and design, like this earthquake spread, or these like sort of beautiful sort of games and visual essays that they would put in there. There's nothing out there quite like it. And then finally, this is I don't have another. Oh, there we go. I mentioned Desert Island, the comic shop. Gabe Fowler, who runs that, also edits a publication called Smoke Signal, which is free if you go to the shop, but you can purchase it online too. That's really a tremendous inspiration for it. He'd ask all manner of different cartoonists to participate, and lately he's been doing sort of issues where a single artist will do the entire thing, and it'll be a tabloid style newspaper with like just pages and pages of wonderful content, from whether it's multiple artists or a single artist, just great stuff across the board. So that's kind of a look at some of our inspirations and so on. What I'm going to do now is actually show you sort of the issue and sort of show you sort of a little bit of issue number one, which was get this. There we go. Which we have in print and it's only available in print, but obviously I put it together on via software. So can sort of show you that a little bit here. And then I'll give you guys a sneak preview of issue number two, which is currently in the layout phase, but there's a lot of good stuff to show there as well. So here we go. So this is sort of how it how it came out, the first issue. And it was a real education to kind of figure out like how this was going to work. I laid it all out in Adobe InDesign, which was a program I had not really had much experience with. So really like kind of a fast, like very down and dirty education and like, okay, how can I lay out blocks of text and figure out how to make everything readable and so on. And so this is our front page there. I designed the banner for that one. The main image here was done by our friend Jen Ray, who is part of a group called the Data Vandals. Jen is like kind of a uh, uh, graphic artist and also a gallery artist, a painter. She does performance sort of stuff, like very, very cool things. And her husband, Jason, is a data visualization expert as his career. And they create these wonderful experiences where they use publicly available data, through New York City in a lot of cases, and use it to create these interactive installations where people can learn more about their surroundings and the history behind it. They have a great piece up at Union Station in LA right now, which is all about different sort of Los Angeles themed stuff that's going to be up for the end of the year. And there's actually you'll see as we get to the back page, they did this wonderful piece about Sister Karita Kent, who we just spoke about, and sort of how her example brings a lot of inspiration to all of us. But so, this first issue we themed it. It was called the theme was dispatches, which is sort of a non-theme in a lot of ways because it's like, oh, it's a message from somewhere to something, but it really, we put out a call for entry, but really mostly among, people that we already knew, our existing communities, friends and family and stuff. And there were a few people that I'd reached out to, like I'd never connected with Donna previously. We'd exchanged a few notes on Patreon, but I asked her if she'd contribute something, and she said sure, and so she sent us this wonderful image that is sadly always going to be relevant, at least in the near future. But a great protest image, and she also sent us a haiku somewhere in here, and every piece of artwork that we had in here was so precious to me. There's a few people. I took an illustration course, School of Visual Arts SVA here in New York with Steve Brodner, the political illustrator, and I kept in touch with a few people from that. So this is Kendra Allenby, who does New Yorker cartoons, or Marie Coons here, who does a lot of sort of editorial illustration and stuff. Did this great train image. I did a piece through here that was this kind of continuing story strip here, based on this sort of mythological city idea that I'd been sort of playing around with, and that spread out across multiple pages at the bottom of the page, so you can sort of follow it as you go through. And a lot of our friends are writers, playwrights, and things like that. So there's definitely a written word emphasis on this first issue in particular. But love to being able to play with different like graphic elements to kind of help different pieces pop. Do some hand drawing. Like I wanted the whole thing to have that hand drawn feel. So very little other than the lettering is actually done, is strictly digital. Whether even if I drew it on the iPad, it was hand drawn, or there's definitely things I drew longhand and then scanned. This is our son's image. He did this one for us when I was like, hey Dash, we have some space to fill, would you like to put something in? So he created this sort of cool riff on the sort of like Felix the Cat clock. Great cartoons. Our friend Carolyn Raship, who's a wonderful illustrator, different, this group Morphic Rooms did these sort of abstract collage type images with us. And whenever we had empty space, it was like, how can we fill this? How can we create a little bit of like a spot illustration, or a little bit of what I keep calling graphic blandishment, which is what at the end of the Peanut specials, the animators are always listed as. It was all Bill Melendez directed them, and they were all like graphic blandishment by, all these different folks. So that's kind of what we love to call that kind of, spot illustration and design and, things like that. And so, what we ended up discovering when we, put this out into the world is, we had a live launch event here in New York that and this was such a treasure. I'd love to point out, the illustrator David Levine, who you probably recognize a lot of his caricature work. It was in New York Review of Books and Esquire for many, many years. This was Hope and I were at a flea market here in Brooklyn, in the Dumbo neighborhood, looking through like posters and stuff, and everything's always usually overpriced and half of it's garbage. And Hope said, "Oh, look at this, David Levine image." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a cool print. I'm sure it's overpriced, whatever." And Hope was like, "Take a closer look at that." And I looked on it and saw the pencil marks underneath the ink. And I was like, holy shit. And like this person was selling it for $12. Had no idea that it was an original. And so I reached out to Levine's son, who runs his estate, and asked him about it. He said there's no record of this image. He doesn't necessarily know what it was for, but with a high res scan, he was able to confirm that it was the real deal. And so in addition to being the proud owner of this original image, which ties back into the theater, and all of that sort of stuff that we started with, is also, I was able to give it what may well be its print debut here. It's not in the archives at Esquire or New York Review of Books that I can find. It says 67 in the print, and I've looked through, all the issues for those years, and no reference to those. So, super cool thing to find. But like, we really found that, between having our reading event, which was the first time a lot of our theater friends have been together in a room since, pre-pandemic, for a project like this, and the sort of the communal creation of it, and also the ability to share it with people around the world, really. People would ask for, "Oh, I'd love to have 50 issues so that I could bring them around to the coffee shops and bookstores in Raleigh, or I think we have some in Portland. We sent some to City Lights Books, in San Francisco and stuff. And we'll get people reach out to us, and be like, "Oh, I want to know more. I want to learn more. I saw an issue in a cafe. Can you mail me a copy?" and stuff. And so we've been connecting with people over this in a way that is sort of broader in some senses than we were able to, back doing theater and stuff. So it's been really great that we've been able to sort of continue bringing this along. And so, here's a sneak preview of our second issue, which is, like I said, still being laid out. But the theme for this issue is dialogues. And so, it was a way to bring a lot of our playwriting friends a little bit more into the fold. There are a lot of straight up dialogue pieces, but bringing some more comics and stuff. And we did a lot of outreach for this one too, to try and get folks to be involved. So the banner for this one was sort of created exquisite corpse style by me and another artist, Eliza Stamps, who was in the first issue as well, to really kind of create the banner image as a little bit of a dialogue. We have Bieni Montero, who enjoy his work online, gave us a couple of pieces like this main one here on the front page. Martina Paukova, Berlin-based illustrator that I'm friendly with, gave us this other image. We have a lot of poetry and stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff I still need to figure out, like our masthead page. This is our full list of creators for this one, because part of what we do is it's incredibly inclusive. We decided how many pages we were going to run based on how many contributions we got, and everybody who contributed has at least something in here, because all the pieces are short, 500 words or less, or some sort of visual equivalent, though we tip the scales in the favor of the visual a little bit, because it's in some ways a little bit harder to come by and a little bit more precious. But it's, even if there's a piece in here that's like, am I in love with it? Not necessarily, but it's important to have it in there, to have that representation of such a wide group of people in it. And so there's stuff like, Tor Freeman, great British cartoonist and illustrator, gave us some pieces. And then here's this Raven images by my aunt, who was an illustrator when I was growing up, and always inspired and encouraged me. And so, different pieces in here, there's, you can see that I have like spaces set out, like, okay, we're going to draw something around there. We're going to get something in there and figure out how to fill the space a little bit. But, we have the next few weeks to kind of really figure that out. Sonica Faude, another amazing artist, she just won an Ignatz Award for her Wedding Juice, her first issue, which is a autobiographical comic about her wedding. And she gave us an excerpt from her second issue there, a dialogue between her and her father. Just some other, wonderful pieces and everything. And this is again sort of the clean view of it. Here's another. The Data Vandals did a Buckminster Fuller little bio piece this time to go with the Karita Kent one for next time. John Broadley, the British cartoonist and illustrator, gave us some of his old strips to put in here. I don't have this as a spread, but this is our center page spread that has sort of a symmetry component going on to it. Again, just sort of getting an idea. Someone gave us a data visualization puzzle based on visualizing the dialogue patterns of different movies, which I'm going to zhuzh up a little bit the design, but that's such a cool thing to have, filled some space with some old art that I'm going to have a Mad Lib style, like add your own dialogue with some word balloons to that, and so on. And so one of the things that was such an embarrassing thing for me is that I'm really bad at basic arithmetic. So I was laying this out for 14 pages because I was like, oh, 14 is divisible by 4, right? 4 times 4 is 14. I was wrong. So we ended up with a couple of additional pages that are at the moment unfilled. So, Donna, when you said you might have something to contribute, I was like, great, would love to. We have some things that I'm already filling those pages with, but I also want to invite everybody here on this call too. If you have anything that you would love to submit, feel free to get in touch with me. You can find I can pop my info in here. It's in the invite too, but I can give you my direct email here. We have some space to fill. Would love to bring in some new voices and some stuff that we might not have seen yet, whether it's some pieces that you have. If you're interested in sharing with some of the graphic blandishment, if you're interested in doing some spot illustrations or helping out, this really has been this tremendous, really community project. We keep referring to it as a community on paper, and that's really kind of what it's turned out to be. We've made connections with and interacted with people around the world in ways that we would not have otherwise. And so if you're interested in being a part of that, we're happy to have you. So I think, and that brings us exactly at time. So I've been rambling, but if anybody has any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer as need be.
I don't know if you have covered everything so beautifully, and for me at least, this was a kind of explosion of nostalgia and the idea that these forms are still with us and can return. Um, I'm happy.
I'm amazed by how many
This is
people
delightful.
when I hand this to people, because I always keep a stack of them in my bag wherever I go. And whenever we run into someone that we meet or an acquaintance or whatever that we run into on the street, I'm like, oh, by the way, here. And it is amazing how many people are just like, oh, thank God. Oh my God. Like, to see something like this. They're like, they're hungry for something in print. They're hungry for something tactile that they can touch, that they can handle. And I've had various friends say that, like, oh my God, I had the experience of, like, opening this up over my coffee in the morning and like just enjoying it, in real time, like without having to interact with a screen with it and everything. Like, I feel like there's I think in our culture right now there's a pendulum swinging in a lot of ways, but I think that this swing back to, the physical, the tactile, the personal is very real, and something that I hope that we're going to continue to see more of over the coming years.
Well, you know about Short Run, right?
Short
And
run.
that thing has got papers like this. It's Short Run. It's run in Seattle.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
just
Okay,
had
yeah.
it. It runs in November. and they have there are so many of these things going on, and they are totally into the paper print. And I bet you if I hooked you guys up, they would love a bundle of those.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. And yeah, you totally reminded me too. For a while we sent a whole bundle of them to KEXP. So they were in the big
Yeah.
broadcast space there for a while. We visited Seattle for the first time in April. I'd never been over to the Northwest before. It was lovely. We loved it
Oh,
though.
okay.
My son loves one of the reasons he picked that from the options that we gave him was that he absolutely adores the rain and the fog and everything. Crystal clear and sunny the full week we were there. He was like so disappointed
Oh,
in us.
April.
Yep, it was April. Yep.
Yeah. Well, he might not have loved it so much for the past couple of weeks. It was exciting. Yeah, it was. People were coming close to typhoons up here.
Oh
So,
wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I'll get you hooked up with Short Run because I'm sure they would love Backishes as well. In Seattle, there's a whole culture of these kinds of newspapers,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
cartoon
Exactly.
newspapers, and including some with the big format like you're using. So you're coming right into what's going on in Seattle. So
That's amazing.
just I'll just make sure I get you guys hooked up.
Absolutely. Would love that. Would love that. And yeah, it's funny you bring up the big format because we had a lot of debates. We were like, do we want it to be that big? And we ended up going, the printer that we work with, it's the largest size that they have. And we were like, you know what? Fine, let's do it. And again, but it makes it a conversation piece. People are like, whoa, this is huge, but it's like a newspaper. You can fold it. You can like,
Yeah.
it's very portable. And it still has that ephemerality that we associate with theater, but it's less ephemeral than theater. Like yeah, it's gonna get yellow, it's gonna get stepped on and torn apart, but like it does still last that little bit longer. Our son was like he was doing a clay project at one point, and we were like, oh, don't do that right on the table here, and we laid out an issue. He's like, oh well, now it's a real newspaper because you're using it for something other than to read it. And we were like, that's right. That's
Well,
right.
you might end up in Seattle getting it used to wrap fish, and which
Yeah,
means it would
exactly.
really be there
Exactly.
where it belongs.
And then you've arrived,
Oh, and if you don't mind, if what I can give you this time, I'm good at doing filler, little spot
Oh, that's great.
illustrations. And I do that a lot, and I know people need them. I
Mm.
mean, lots of people can provide full strips and illustrations and everything else, but I know you've always got little block
Yep,
spaces where
yep,
you
yep.
need those things. So let me sit down and see what kind. This is just dialogue, right? Is what it's
Yeah,
about.
dialogues is the theme,
Just
and that can be interpreted in so many different ways. So yeah,
Yeah,
happy to have you
I've
riff
already
on
got
that.
an idea right now with the
That's
spot
amazing.
illustrations, and then that way you can just drip them in. Because I know what happens when you're trying to lay this stuff out. This happened with convention programs and everything else that end up with white spaces. And
Yep,
so I would,
absolutely.
Donna, can you get us some spots? And so I'll get you a bunch. I don't know how many spots you'll need, but
Yeah,
give
Hap,
me an
that
idea,
would be
and I'll
amazing.
just give you a bunch.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great. And I can
we'll
even
just
send
do
you some
we'll
of the
do a
dimensions for some of
spot
the
thing.
spaces that we're already anticipating if there's
Yeah.
anything that like, you give you
Or
any
I could
ideas.
even do I used to do in if you look at my comic books, I would do silly things with the
Yeah,
page
with the
numbers.
pages. Totally, totally. You know
Um
what? That's actually wonderful. Hold on. I'm going to bring the screen back up because I can show you something that I've been trying to figure out. And this might be the thing. Because one of the complaints we got from the complaints, but like from the first issue is that we didn't have page numbers. And so I have this blank bar at the top of
oh
every page right here that I was like, I need to get a page number in there on one side, but like the rest of it can be whatever. Like if you wanted to do some like desert peach style with your little angels and devils or whatever you come up with for the page numbers, that
I'll do
would
the
be
angels and devils because man, everybody knows we're in the middle of angels and devils
oh
right
my
now.
God,
So, well, I
absolutely.
guess I'm doing angels and devils spot numbers and
Oh
page
my
numbers.
God,
How's
that would
that
be so
sound?
great. Oh, I love it. I'm in love with that
Yeah,
idea. Thank you so much.
yeah.
That I think that's really gonna
Okay,
like
and just let me know how
chef's
many
kiss.
pages you got, and then that way I can. I don't have to. I'll tell you what, it'll be an open-ended story, so that wherever it ends, it ends.
Great. Yeah,
That way
we're
you
at
don't have to
we're at
worry
16
about how
pages,
many
but really it would
pages
be
to go.
only 16 pages, but the first page is the masthead, so that one wouldn't be numbered. So it's pages 2 through 16.
Yeah, so you got 15 pages. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I could pop you 15 little angels and devils. Just
Oh,
let me
that's so
know. How
good.
big are they? They're just,
These are, and I
yeah.
can give you the
Are they
exact
long? Are
dimensions.
they
They're
short?
long. They're like
Yeah.
very, very,
Yeah,
very
just
like.
email me the dimensions
I'll
and
give
then
you the, yeah,
we'll
exactly. I'll
just do
give you the
that. We'll do
little.
angels and devils.
That's so cool. I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you. That's great.
So
I'm
cool.
thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. And yeah, if anybody else has
Yay.
any ideas for a thing, or if you want to contribute to some of the spot stuff too, the over the next I'd say like 3 or 4 weeks. Of course, it's the holidays, but really 3 or 4 weeks is when we're our idea is that we want to have we want to get it to print by the end of January. It'll probably end up being kind of an
Mhm.
early February launch. We went into the fall with these ambitions that like, oh, we're going to be doing this twice a year. It's going to be January and July, and then we part of the joy of this project is not stressing ourselves out over it, for it to be something that's that's
Mhm.
that's joyful, and we're not, it's not like we have paid subscribers that are waiting for their issue to come in, so we're like letting ourselves do it on our own time. And if we end up like, if it ends up being 2 issues in a year, great. If it's three, even better. If it's one, that's fine too. It's going to be sort of a little bit of a catch
Well,
as catch can kind of thing.
I always published my issues, once I was started up doing my own publication. I published when I was done. I trained my readers to just wait for it to
To
come
wait for it,
in,
that's
and
great.
they were happy when it happened. Just look, you want it fast, you want it fast, you want it good.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
when I
Exactly.
get it done, I'll get it done.
No, and
Yeah.
I think that's exactly the way to do it.
So,
The one sense in which I
yeah.
feel a little guilty about it is, we'll have some contributors who like, it's 6 months after they contributed that we're finally publishing it, which is normal in like real publishing. People definitely like submit to,
Oh, yeah.
small presses and stuff and have to wait forever. But, again, because since I have that theater background and I'm so expecting things to be like, taking place in real time, I'm always like, oh, but they're going to be so worried what's about when it's going to get published. And I kind of need to let some of that go too, because
Look, they're
all of our
just happy
contributors
to
are so
get the
generous.
job done.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they're just happy to get the job done. Okay, the job is done. You got it. You get it out when you get there.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's like a guy I know that I worked for 15 years ago. And I love this guy because he is still dribbling little bits of money to all his contributors over the
Oh, that's
years.
great.
Love him. Nobody's in a panic over this. I mean, what the only thing they really care about is the fact they got the job done.
Right.
And
No, and
then
I'm the
you
same
get
way.
in there.
When I'm the one
I'm
doing the
done. I've
job,
done
I'm
my
just like, okay,
deadline.
great.
I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
it's up to you to get it on stage
Right.
and get it presented because they did their work.
Uh-huh.
Think of them as
Uh-huh.
costumers, okay, or the
Hmm.
background painters or whatever. They got their job done.
Yep.
Now it's your turn,
Yep.
and they won't worry about it when they get the copy. It's like, oh, cool! Look what I got.
That's such a great perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I got to
yeah.
keep
They're
that
just
in
happy to
mind.
get it done.
Yeah.
Actually, if you tell them that, oh my God, it might be another 8 months, they're like,
Yeah.
I don't have
Yep.
to hurry.
No, exactly.
Although I
And
don't
that's
mind
and that's
having a bit of a deadline.
overwhelmingly the
Yeah.
response I get, but I still work myself up. I feel
Well,
I take
relax. These are
over
cartoonists.
too
These
much
are not theater
responsibility.
people.
Right. Well, some of them are theater
I've
people, and
worked
they're
with
often
theater
the
people.
ones who they're the ones who are like, so where are we at with that?
Look, my experience with theater was the cast gave me a T-shirt that said "Friends don't let friends produce musicals,"
Yeah, well,
and
that's that's good advice.
well, ask Maureen. She was at the musical. We because of one thing or another, there's no copy and no evidence of this musical, but everybody had fun.
Well, okay, that's good. I was going to ask if there was any evidence of it. So, okay,
Hey, we broke even.
that which for theater is tremendous.
We broke even.
Yeah, no, I
And
only ever lost money doing theater, far and away.
well, to give you the attitude of theater people, our composer was dying of AIDS while he was
Oh,
composing,
wow.
and he had a choice of either going to bed and spending a few more months alive or killing himself doing a musical. Guess which
Wow.
he chose?
Yep.
He was literally
Wow.
up in the orchestra cliff with an IV bottle attached while he's conducting in his tuxedo.
Wow.
This is courage.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's no,
dedication.
he was.
Wow.
That's what was going on. The man was literally passing away. Uh, but his attitude, do I just want to slowly die in bed, or do I want to live a shorter
Right.
time and have music?
Do it on his
And
terms.
somebody just
Yeah.
recently put all that music from the Desert Beach musical up on the internet, and we're not sure who.
Oh, wow.
So it's up on the internet.
As in
The
recordings or like the
original
sheet
tapes
music?
from the original.
Oh my God, I would love to hear
No, this
that.
is the recordings.
I would love
Yeah,
to
and
hear
it's like
that.
somebody was like, "Oh, look at this! Here it is." It was like, "How the heck did that happen?" Um, People like the Seattle Times want us to do it again, but it would take $1 million to do it.
Right, right, right.
Maureen
I
was
mean,
there. She would know. She saw. Look, we didn't understand about musicals. We didn't understand. So we thought it was perfectly okay for, and I was a costumer and producer and everything. I was everything but on stage. Everybody, I was involved in everything. I thought it was perfectly fine to have 80 characters and the
right.
costumes they would need. However, I got 80 historical costumes done for $1,000.
That's incredible.
It's a great play.
But
That is
like I
no
said,
joke.
I will never do another musical
No, that's
as long as I
oh my
live.
God.
But
Oh,
his music's out there, and he was amazing. He was astounding. He just decided that he was going to show you the courage of theater people. He decided, I'm
yeah.
gonna I'm gonna do the musical.
Yep.
So,
Oh, amazing. Amazing story.
I mean, what do you want to do? You want to spend your time in bed, or you want to conduct a musical?
Yeah.
Which one do you want to do? Which one's more fun?
Right, right. Tremendous. Tremendous. I look forward to that.
So that's what theater
And if
people
I
are
ever
like.
come
They're
into $1 million,
incredibly creative.
I would love to invest in that musical.
Yeah, well, I've got the 72 background slides all set to
Oh my
go.
God,
I
amazing.
got the artwork for that if they need redone or whatever. We didn't
If we ever,
have background theater. We had 72 slides that ran like a movie during
wow,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
course.
Oh, that must have been so
So people
gorgeous.
were in North Africa and they went. Well, anyway, that's my musical, and that's
Oh God,
I'm
I
talking
love it.
about
I
your
love it.
theater.
If we ever do another comic book theater festival, we at least have to do a reading of it, like with the slides so that people can get a feel for that.
Well, I'd have to get a hold
Invite
of
some
the slides or
investors.
have them rescan. I know where the artwork is. I've got the files, so we can put something together. I have the materials, so if you ever wanted to do the dialogue for the Desert Peach musical is Desert Peach 1, of which all of a sudden Steve Galacci found boxes of them.
I
So I have
know.
boxes of Desert Peach 1s, which could be, the audience could read along.
Oh my God, amazing. Yeah, thank you for sending me those. I was able to I gave one of them to a friend of mine who I turned on to the Desert Peach and cherishing my other copies of it. So I'm so glad that you found those. That was great.
Hey, look, we had people who actually made an exploding teapot that you could put together again to explode again the next time.
Amazing. Amazing.
With rubber bands or something. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, those
Now,
prop
you and
people
I are
are
going to have
very
to sit,
resourceful.
you and I are going to have a Zoom meeting, and I'm going to have to tell you the background stories that went on
Oh my
backstage
God. I
at
would
that
love that.
musical.
I would love
They're
that. That'll be
nuts.
great. Looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah. 15 Chinese Mausers.
Oh, damn.
Anyway, I'm sorry. You get me started on that music. It was crazy. Anyway, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions? I just thought he covered things incredibly well.
It was a very insightful talk. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. I'm
Wonderful.
always happy to talk. And yeah, if anybody wants to, connect with me outside, has any other questions or wants to, get involved in slips or anything like that, always open for that. Just let me know.